Hello, I'm Liam Fogarty. You're watching Bay TV. If you want to know the time, ask a policeman. If you want to know about policing on Merseyside, you ask my guest today. She is Jane Kennedy, Police and Crime Commissioner for Merseyside. Jane, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
You've been over 2 years in the job, and yet a lot of people on Merseyside really have no idea what you do.
No.
What do you do?
I've got three really clear responsibilities. A few more in the legislation, but primarily I hold the Chief Constable to account for the conduct of the force, for the delivery of the police service in Merseyside. Part of that involves setting his budget, enabling the force, and I think that's the second responsibility that I've got. I'm required to work with partners to help the force reduce crime on Merseyside. So I have to work with local authorities, the probation service, the criminal justice service, right across Merseyside to keep working forward all together for that objective of keeping Merseyside and Liverpool as one of the safest cities in the country to come and live and work and do your business in.
There was always this idea that the Chief Constable, Sir John Murphy in this case, has day-to-day operational control, but you would kind of hover above all that. How does that work? Because I imagine you must see Sir John most days of the week, probably have a chat about the latest drug bust or the latest kind of policy statement. How easy is it to maintain that kind of division between operational control and political control, which is what your post is about?
I had a number of conversations with the Chief Constable quite early on, and he and I agreed a modus operandi, if you like. And one of the things we decided was, yes, it was really important that we keep in regular contact. And in order to do that properly and to do it in a visible way, we agreed to have fortnightly meetings on a one-to-one basis. And what we do, and it's taken us a little while to get it right, but what we do is we have an agenda. We publish the agenda and the minutes and decisions after the meeting, but the meeting itself is a full and frank discussion between him and I about what are the current threats of risk and of harm to the citizens of Merseyside, and I talk to him about how can I help and what concerns I might have. And those have worked pretty well, and we publish the outcomes. It gives local people the chance to raise something with me in a meeting that I can then take directly to the Chief Constable. He can then consider and respond. And I usually give him notice of what I'm going to raise with him, and he will be prepared at the meeting normally to give me a response.
Because one of the criticisms of the old system with a police authority was that members of the authority saw it as their job to back the police and to, as it were, go native. Have you taken a rather more robust, maybe combative approach when you deal with the Merseyside police force?
Not in public. I don't think I have in public, and I don't think I would be that would be levelled at me. That accusation that I think there's a danger in a police commissioner adopting megaphone diplomacy. If I have a criticism or a concern about something that the force is doing, I will go and see the Chief Constable in the first instance. And I would say, this has been reported to me, or I have seen this happen. Can you explain to me what's going on? And I will discuss it. If I remained concerned, and if he couldn't explain what was happening, or the public concern continued, he and I would have to work our way forward on that, because I would want to continue to say to him, look, I don't think the public are happy with what is happening. We haven't ever come to that point. I mean, there have been issues that have been raised from time to time, and I've been able to go to him and we've been able to discuss them. The number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads is a good example of that. And as a result of that concern being raised by organisations that I've met on a basis when I go out and talk to people, meet people in their different organisations, Neighbourhood Watch, local council surgeries, local public meetings, the Rotary Club, all sorts of organisations that I've met, those sorts of issues are raised. Dangerous dogs, very topical. I will talk to the police about what they're doing to manage the threat of harm and the risk to people. And usually I've never come across an occasion where either the chief or his force have not been able to respond and explain what they're doing. Not always agree, but sometimes just say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. And once I'm reassured, then we can move forward again.
Now, you've been getting out and about to a lot of these community or neighbourhood forums where the local police commander turns up, and you've been turning up. What kind of themes, what kind of concerns have ordinary people been raising with you at those meetings?
There's a lot of concern about crime. People anywhere in the country, it is something that's quite high on many people's lists of concerns.
Are they over concerned, given the fact that we're in an era when crime is falling, and in fact on Merseyside we have some of the most improving crime figures in the UK?
What you'll find is the meetings are less attended where there is generally less concern. So, for example, I would have attended quite early on after my election meetings in Maghull where there'd been a series of shootings and gang-related violence. And I would attend meetings that would be really full of people, 40, 50, 60 people in attendance. And helping me at that meeting would be, as you say, the local commanders and the people organising the police response. Because what I have at all times to be careful of is that I never stray into the realm of telling the police what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. I'm a politician, I'm not a police officer. I've never been a professional police officer, and I ought not ever to take on the role of dictating to the police how they should be doing their job.
But in terms of the kind of concerns, you say fear of crime, what about things like antisocial behaviour?
Yes.
And also, what about things about the visibility of police officers, because that's what people want. They want bobbies on the beat.
Antisocial behaviour, hate crime, for example. Often hate crime, it's a phrase that covers a large range of different crimes, and sometimes hate crime will be reported as vandalism, or it will be reported as name-calling, or it doesn't get reported at all, or it's described as antisocial behaviour. And what we have to do is be alive to the fact that although antisocial behaviour as a whole, across the whole of Merseyside, the figures unequivocally tell us we're getting safer, communities are getting calmer, more peaceful, and we have to trust those figures because they are largely correct, but doesn't mean that people aren't anxious about it, which is why the discussions I've been having with people about where their police stations are, about the fact that only 12 police stations across Merseyside are actually open to the public. All of the rest are closed to the public already. We're not closing police stations, they're already closed. And that's what people are concerned that they worry that there isn't a police officer that they can go to and tell about something that's going on. They know if there's an emergency, they'll call 999, or if it's urgent, they'll ring 101, and they know they'll get through to speak to somebody who will help them. But sometimes they just want to go and talk to somebody face to face, like you and I are doing, about maybe repeat vandalism or an abandoned car.
But isn't that going to be harder if you're going to start closing down police stations?
But I'm not, you see. What I'm doing is I'm going to replace the police stations that we've got that are currently closed to the public with community police stations like those they've got in St Helens. They've got two particularly good examples in Mossbank and in the Millersdale station, which is actually in the 4 Acres estate near to the clock face. And they've been developing this concept for quite some time. The local authority, along with the housing association, investing in a shared facility. The police coming along and building a police station in that shared facility, and that has brought together lots of different organisations. They all benefit from being co-located, and although the police are not there every day, they're not open every day. They're open usually just one day a week. But the fact that they're there and using that building brings reassurance to the local community.
But you've got some convincing to do, haven't you, Jane? Because I happen to live in an area of Liverpool, which is Tewbrook, where there is a police station, which to all intents and purposes is not open to the public. And when people want a police officer, when they want some sort of response or some help, they can see this building on the corner and the shutters are down and the lights are out. Now, how could you convince people in an area like that your plan for kind of rolling out kind of merged community stations is as good as, if not better than, a good old-fashioned cop shop, open, if not 24/7, at least during working hours?
We no longer have the number of police officers that it would need to staff a police station all over Merseyside like that in the way that it used to be done. We have, in the last 4 years, since 2010, we have lost 1,200 people. That's 700 police officers and PCSOs and staff up to 1,200 from Merseyside Police. We know that if the austerity policy continues, and it doesn't have to, Liam, a little bit of politics.
Well, you had plenty of time for that after the break. I want to talk about austerity, and I want to talk about the impact, because you've had to ship out tens of millions of pounds out of your budget.
Yes.
You're looking at your portfolio of properties.
Yes.
But we'll return to that in the next part of the programme when we continue meeting Jane Kennedy, Merseyside Police and Crime Commissioner. Welcome back. I'm Liam Fogarty. You're watching Bay TV, and I'm meeting Jane Kennedy, Merseyside's Police and Crime Commissioner. Jane, we were talking then about the impact of austerity, of the cuts that Merseyside and other police forces have had to endure. You've taken about 60 million out of a budget of 330 million pounds over the last 3 to 4 years. But the promise or threat is that there are more cuts to come.
Yes.
Can the service you preside over and answer for be a viable police service for people in the county under those financial constraints?
I honestly don't know. I fear not. What we see happening is the police force increasingly becoming the first responders, the blue light service of last resort. We have had 1 or 2 incidents recently where people have called for ambulance support. It hasn't arrived. We presume because of lack of resources in the ambulance service, and the police have been left to be the ones to, in one instance, take the person concerned to hospital. And that is beginning to happen too often. Just since I was elected, one of the top priorities was to try and deal with people who had mental health issues, who were not getting the quick, rapid response that they needed from mental health services. And instead, again, the police were filling the gap. We can't afford to keep doing that as other public services sort of ebb away. We can't be the service that people look to respond. We can only do that for a certain period of time. And I was talking to Tony Lloyd just this morning, who's the PCC for Greater Manchester, who told me that he fears that he will not have a viable police force if this continues into the next 4 or 5 years. It just can't, it doesn't work like that. The people are what are really important. And if you keep taking people away, you can't keep delivering the public service.
The Inspectorate, Her Majesty's Inspectorate
Yes.
of Constabulary, published a report earlier this year,
Yeah.
which was actually very complimentary about
Yes.
Merseyside Police
Yes.
in terms of how it had responded
Yeah.
to cuts and to austerity. 2 things. Did that suggest there was a lot of fat beforehand? And actually, the second thing, do you think you can actually cope, and that local politicians, local government and police forces always overdo the kind of woe is me, cuts crisis narrative?
There's two aspects to that. The first is to reassure your viewers that I oversee a process called the change governance, the sustaining excellence, which is a change programme, a formal process agreed with the staff side and the trade unions, and wherein they are involved right from the first stage. So they will be involved in talking to their members, and the management talk to their staff about how can we do the same service differently with fewer people and save money as we go along. We are now into the 5th cycle of that process since 2010. I've seen how rigorous it is. I've seen the lengths to which the management and trade unions work together to agree a way forward. And by doing that, Merseyside Police have been able to take those posts out of the service and still maintain their effectiveness. I get told by the public they believe they're seeing fewer of their officers on the beat. I suspect that's true, although the numbers that we put into neighbourhood policing, we are fighting really hard to sustain. But what our problem is that I believe we've got ministers in a government who don't truly understand the pressure that an urban force like Merseyside is under. Bear in mind they will largely represent country constituencies with relatively better off communities. They potentially don't see the same pressure on the force as we do. Plus the Home Secretary, I believe, makes a mistake when she says the only thing police forces have to do is fight crime. In fact, if you look at the calls for assistance to Merseyside Police, they get something like 10 times as many calls for assistance for other things that are not directly crime related.
But given the fact money is tight, it'll be tight whatever the political stripe of the next government. What can Merseyside Police do to create money of its own? I mean, you have a portfolio of police stations, you have this plan to maybe sell a few of them off, but for instance, you have your own training centre at Mather Avenue. Time was when there was one training centre for the northwest of England where forces came together and they merged. Is there a possibility of kind of teaming up with neighbouring forces on things like training, admin, payroll, back office functions that would save you money and also allow you to put it back out there on the front line?
Do, Liam, is I think they will be smarter than doing it wholesale. What we see developing is really serious proposals around sharing the training for certain specialities, if you want to call it that. So, for example, firearms officers. It makes sense where we can to train them through a common training programme, maybe using a common facility, and then all the forces can hopefully, by pooling the costs, reduce the overall cost to them and their budgets. I'm just saying that's one of the ideas that we're looking at. We can share other services, and we're talking actively with the other forces around the Northwest about how we can do that. They're still very much embryonic discussions at the moment, but they are taking that very seriously, and where they can save money by doing that and still maintain a good service, then they will. But they're going to need to have a local facility that keeps the level of skills and training for Merseyside officers in, for example, public order training. They're very expensive facilities to develop these. If we've got one, and if we've got a good one, it would be really much more expensive to replace it.
Well, you have the one in Lee Green, don't you, near St Helens, which other forces use.
Yes.
But are you ever tempted when you drive down to Mather Avenue and look at the splendid training centre to think, do you know what, we could build some houses here and I could raise an awful lot of money?
Yes, but it's also the home of the mounted section and the dog section. Moving those facilities is more expensive than maintaining them at the moment. Now, but all of this will be reviewed constantly, which is why the estates programme is only just starting. We will be, wherever we can, releasing buildings that we no longer use, and there are quite a few of them around Merseyside. They're not just closed to the public, they're completely shut. Nobody uses them at all. We need to let them go, but replace them with local facilities that local people can have access to on that basis that I was describing in St Helens. And that will allow local people to, because I think one of the biggest concerns I've met from the public is a sense that, although in fact it may not be true because we have the same number of neighbourhood officers, there's a sense that the force has retreated a little bit by closing the stations and that there isn't that access. Now, what we have to do is try and restore that connection. We've got a very good degree of support from the public of Merseyside. They approve of Merseyside Police by and large. They support what they're doing. And I know that it's often said they don't tell the police intelligence and so on. We know that's not true. And we know that people do talk to the police. It's really precious, that. And we have to work really hard to sustain that going forward, whatever happens.
In Scotland, they did away with all their regional forces to create one police force, Police Scotland.
Yes.
The last Labour government kind of flirted with the idea of merging police forces. Has that gone away, or do you think we could have a Merseyside and Cheshire force or a North West force purely to save money and to provide some form of basic policing service?
Look, it is being discussed, and the Labour Party is still flirting with that idea, as you suggest, and I agree with you. I actually think there's a danger that this sounds like special pleading. It isn't. I really believe that connection between the public and their force, including knowing who the leader is, that is the Chief Constable, knowing where to go if you've got a complaint about the way the force is behaving, I think that's really important. If you move to a regional force, who runs it? Where do you put the headquarters? Do people start to feel that the police service is getting more and more distant in the way that it's managed? I think that's a danger, and I would hate to see that happen personally.
I'll give you another opportunity for some special pleading, and that is the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Yes.
Because Ed Balls, certainly, and other senior figures in your party, and it's still your party.
It is, yeah.
They reckon they should do away with the role.
Yes.
To save money, and because it doesn't do what it says on the tin. Are you bending their ear saying, no, save, it's great, we need these commissioners, or are you kind of happy to fall into line?
Look, we meet as a group of PCCs regularly. When we do, the Labour front bench, Yvette and her colleagues, Yvette Cooper, happy to meet us, and we talk about this a lot. But to be fair, they always said they would abolish PCCs. They said when the Tories introduced the idea, we don't agree with it, it's highly risky, these people, you'll put them in great positions of power, they're likely to abuse it. Now, I don't think you can criticise the Labour Party on that policy for being inconsistent. They're saying exactly what they said.
But you're disproving the Labour Party's point, are you not?
Look,
because you're enormously responsible and whatever.
Well, I try, and I think by and large PCCs have done a good job, and we've made the best fist we could of what is still quite a tricky role and still quite risky. And to be perfectly honest, Liam, I firmly believe that this country needs a Labour government more than it needs PCCs.
And we need to stop talking. Jane Kennedy, it's been a pleasure.
Police
and Crime Commissioner for Merseyside, at least for another 2 years,
Oh, well,
we
we'll
think.
see. Thank you very much.
That's all from Liam Fogarty Meets. Join me again soon.